All right, so Rita adds for the first time, and instead of like providing some sort of insight, which is what the narrator seems to be looking for, it's just to sort of make fun, um, and go from there. So Denver, he says, I don't say anything more on the subject, though I am curious. She's curious, maybe, maybe because it's Denver, but also just because she's feeling this sort of strange connection with him, because of in many ways, possibly because of the toxicity of where she works and the people she works with. When I serve his soup, I see the bread has disappeared again. We get the repetition of the four businessmen being very demanding. Believe me, he says, we don't eat like this all the time. He puffs. You'll have to excuse us, he says. Don't think a thing about it, I say. I like to see a man eat and enjoy himself, I say. I don't know, he says. Guess that's what you call it, puffs. He arranges a napkin. He picks up his spoon. God, he's fat, says Leander. He can't help it, I say, so shut up. She's defensive here for the first time. We didn't see her being defensive whenever Margot said it. She's growing. Again, it's showing the bond growing. I put down another basket of bread, more butter. Again, she keeps feeding him. Thank you. It was good, very good. He wipes his lips, dabs his chin. Do you think it's warm in here? Is it just me? He says. No, it is warm in here, I say. Maybe we'll take off our coat, he says. Go right ahead, I say. Person has to be comfortable. It's true, he says. Very, very true, he says. But I see a little later he's still wearing his coat. An interesting thing to notice. Also, and you may have felt it, and you may feel it more as these stories progress. And of the ones I've picked, rarely does anything menacing actually happen. And even in all the Carver stories, it's not that way. But there is sort of a sense of menace in these stories sometimes, where I've had people read this first story say, I thought he was going to kill somebody. I don't know why it's always killed, but like there are these moments in these Carver stories where you think something very dreadful is going to happen, and sometimes it does, but it's not necessarily what we were expecting, or in the sort of the cheap way that we're used to expecting it happen. My large parties are gone now. I see the old couple places emptying out. By the time I serve the fat man his chops and baked potato along with more bread and butter, he's the only one left. Right, now look how she's taking care of him here, dropping lots of sour cream on his potato. I sprinkle bacon and chives over his sour cream. I bring him more bread and butter. Is everything all right? I say, fine, he says, and he puffs. Excellent, thank you, he says, and puffs again. Enjoy your dinner, I say. I raise the lid of his sugar bowl and look in. He nods and keeps looking at me until I move away. I now know that I was after something, but I don't know what. It's unspeakable. She can't put her lips around it, right? She can't wrap her brain around it and say it. Yet she was lingering. Why was she lingering? She needs to know. That's part of it. She needs to know why she was lingering, why she felt this deep connection here. How's old Tubba-Guts doing? He's going to run your legs off, says Harriet. You know Harriet. No, we don't. But we do. For dessert, I say the Fat Man's a Green Lantern special, pudding cake with sauce, cheesecake, vanilla ice cream, pineapple sherbet. We're not making it late, are we? He says, puffing, looking concerned. Not at all. Of course not. Take your time. I'll bring you more coffee. Now, we also know that she goes home with Rudy. She and Rudy live together. So her lingering is also probably some sort of evidence of her not really liking where she lives or who she lives with. We'll be honest with you. He says, can I have, and he asks for like this sort of special dessert. We told you we're hungry. I go up from the kitchen, see after dessert myself. Rudy says, Harriet says you got a fat man from the circus out there. That true? And all along, just the language about this customer has been sort of ugly. This is where it really, really sort of starts to teeter into the cruel, and it comes from her boyfriend, the person she lives with, has a relationship with. He says he's like a circus, basically calls him a circus freak. Rudy has his apron and hat off now, if you see what I mean. Again, we're going to have to sort of guess what she means there, but it seems to mean like he's ready to go. He's done his job. Her job isn't over, but he doesn't care. Rudy, he is fat. I say, but that's not the whole story. She's trying to get it out here. Note that when she tells her boyfriend, her connection, her relationship, that there's more to it than that. Like, he's fat, but there's more to it. I feel something. His first instinct is to laugh. Rudy just laughs. Sounds to me like she's sweet on fat stuff, he says. Gotta read a note here I made to myself a long time ago. Oh yeah, okay. Better watch out, Rudy says Joanne, who just that minute comes into the kitchen. I'm getting jealous. So there's like now they're joking around, like very childish. So she puts the special from the fat man. Thank you, says, you're very welcome, I say. and a feeling comes over me. She doesn't quite understand it, but it's warmth. Believe it or not, he says, we've not always eaten like this. Me, I eat and I can't gain, I say. I'd like to gain, I say. So we get the impression that she's sort of frail. No, he says, if we had our choice, no, but there is no choice. And he picks up his spoon and eats. What else, Rita says, lighting one of my cigarettes and pulling her chair closer to the table. This story is getting interesting now, Rita says. And that's when Carver pulls the table back, or pulls the dressing off the table. That's it, nothing else. He eats his dessert, then leaves, and we go home, Rudy and me. Now, again, this is the big part of the story, but she doesn't want to admit that. So she keeps going. There is more to it. And the fact that she has this sort of moment at home where she feels something, we'll talk about it in a minute, is really the story she's trying to get to. But she feels like that's exposing too much of her. So she's framing it through this weird bond she had with the fat customer. But the heaviness happens here. They go home, Rudy and me. Some fatty, Rudy says, stretching like he does when he's tired. Then he just laughs and goes back to watching TV. Note that when they get home from work, they work at the same restaurant. When they get home from work, he rests and she continues to work. I put the water on to boil for tea, take a shower. I put my hand on my middle and wonder what would happen if I had children, and one of them turned out to look like that, so fat. Now, she's not pregnant here, but she is thinking about her life in this moment, because if she were to have a child at this point, it does look like she would have it with Rudy, and Rudy would be the father. So she wonders what would happen if I had a child like that. This sort of cruel father, would his father make fun of him? Of course, Rudy doesn't do much to reassure her when she gets back. Pour the water in the pot, arrange a cup, sugar bowl, carton and a half, take the tray out to Rudy. As if he's been thinking about it, Rudy says, I knew a fat guy once. The fact that she's gone, she's done all this stuff, they've moved beyond it. But the fact that Rudy has spent all this time in his mind thinking up more things to say just shows you the level of his sort of cruelty and just general meanness. And it says, yeah, I knew a fat guy once, a couple of fat guys, really fat guys when I was a kid. They were tubbies, my God. I don't remember their names. Fat. That's the only name this one kid had. We called him Fat, the kid who lived next door to me. He was a neighbor. So not only is he cruel, but he's also terribly unimaginative as a child. So the one name is Fat. Now the next name, his name was Wobbly. Everybody called him Wobbly except for the teachers. Thank God. Wobbly and Fat. Wish I had their pictures, Rudy says. What a weird, gross thing to say. It's almost as to say, I wish I could continue to make fun of them and have this sort of concrete visual evidence so we could just point at it and laugh at it. Just sort of a little disgusting character. I can't think of anything to say. How could you? So we drink our tea, and pretty soon I get up and go to bed. Rudy gets up too, turns off the TV, locks the front door, and begins his unbuttoning. I get into bed, move clear over to the edge, and lie there on my stomach. Right away, as soon as he turns off the light and gets into bed, Rudy begins. I turn on my back and relax some, though it is against my will. Now, I feel I do need to point this out because language is important. Now, they have sex here. And I think it's important to note that anytime there's a phrase that close to the act of them having sex, when you say against my will, I think it's reasonable to say she's certainly not up in the mood, but the against my will is referring to her trying to relax, just in terms of the syntax there. So you can read more into it there, but I don't think that's what Carver's going for this sort of being a rape situation. Certainly read it that way, but I don't think that's the accurate reading. I do think that against my will is in direct reference to the trying to relax, which, you take it a step further. I mean, she's certainly not into it. So then there's stuff to get in there too. But again, I don't think it's that story, but I think it's fair to discuss, and certainly on Moodle too. But here's the thing. Here's sort of the moment. This is sort of the closest thing you'll get to a Carver epiphany. But here's the thing. When he gets on me, I suddenly feel I am fat. I feel I am terrifically fat. So fat that Rudy is a tiny thing and hardly there at all. Now, that's what she's having trouble to explain. So she tried at first just to say it was just the fat guy, but she had this connection with him, but there was more to it. So she keeps talking to Rita because she's got to get it out there. And it's this moment where Rudy was on top of her, they were having sex, and all of a sudden she felt fat. what the fuck is that I'm feeling? That's a funny story, Rita says, but I can see she doesn't know what to make of it. Neither does the narrator. So Rita's no help. The reader's like, I don't know what the hell's going on here. I feel depressed, but I won't go into it with her. I've already told her too much. It means she's brought the relationship into it because she doesn't know how else to say it, and that makes her uncomfortable. So she's not going to dig deeper, dig as deep as she needs to figure out what the problem here is. She sits there waiting, her dainty fingers poking her hair, waiting for what, I'd like to know. So now she gets mad at Rita. It's almost as if Rita's judging her. It's August. My life is going to change. I feel it. Now, that seems to be over enthusiastically hopeful for the situation, as she can't pinpoint what's going on here. But certainly there's a problem in her relationship. Now, the big question comes for us to answer is like, why does she feel fat in that moment of sex? I think there's maybe three things to look at. First of all, I think we find out that she's sort of petite or slight, even can't gain weight. But I think there's a certain amount of self-consciousness brought on by her coworkers' comments about the fat guy and Rudy's comments too, to where it's sort of internalized, and it's in her psychology there. So I think that any time, I think as humans we gravitate towards insults, physical insults. I think it's normal for others who hear those, even if they're not directed at them, to feel some sort of impact from them, which is why you probably shouldn't do that. Two, I think it speaks to her connection with, and this may be the most important, she's sort of bonded with this character and showing that she's a bigger person than Rudy. Rudy's small when it comes to his sense of humanity. I mean, you could also say it's some sort of sexual inadequacy is hinted at too. I mean, she says, the phrase "tiny thing" is in there whenever she's referring to the sex. So there's that too. So it's a lot going on there psychologically. She's trying to pinpoint, she can't. But the point of this story is that she's telling a story and with hopes to explain it, and she fails at that. What happens when we fail to tell the stories we need to tell and make the connections we need to make? That may be the thing we look at Carver with the most. It's like, what happened if Tim wasn't able to save Timmy's life with a story? Back in the things they carry. What if he didn't have that ability to do that? What happens to the characters then? It's a teacher Bruce Springsteen class. It's like his first big album was Born to Run. It's about these characters who are young and they're trying to get out of town and they run someplace, all that youthful enthusiasm. Well, his next album was about what happens when you gotta stop running and you end up stuck somewhere and you have to live your life. So this does feel like sort of one other side to a coin with Tim O'Brien. Whatever the case, she feels a connection and she struggles to explain it, but she wants to. She wants desperately to. And I don't think it's a hopeful story, but it does end at least with a little bit more hope than we do get in future stories. These are, again, it's characters sort of on the brink. Hopefully her life changes for the better. We don't know though. So that's your introduction to Carver. Plenty to talk about. If you have questions and if you didn't see these things or you're not quite getting it, feel free to talk about that too. All right, or message me directly. Okay, for next time, Wednesday, we'll look at Neighbors and They're Not Your Husband, and I believe both of those are linked. So you should have access to those. Both of them are third-person stories, so you can see a little bit of a difference there. Both of them one of them may have the most plot, the most symmetrical plot of all the Carver stories we read, but both are very strange, and hope you like them. All right, bye-bye.